Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Hannah Booth and I'm the Communications and Content Manager at MorePay. In terms of the structure of the webinar this afternoon, I'll begin by introducing our presenters. I'll run through how you can ask questions throughout the webinar, and I'll also go through the agenda. And after the main body of the presentation, we'll come to the Q&A period. So I'll begin by sharing a message from everyone at MorePay. We're all in this together, keeping the UK paid. We realise that all businesses across the UK are facing challenges at the moment, whether that's in their transition to home working, whether that's payroll teams consuming and deploying new emergency legislation that the government's announced. At MorePay, all of our staff are working from home. That includes our payroll teams, our development teams that are working extremely hard to ensure that as new legislation is announced, we get this deployed as soon as possible. And this webinar today is a follow-on from the webinar that took place last week. It was my colleagues Dan, Ant and David that hosted the webinar that I think a number of you attended. They provided a product update, and in today's session, my colleagues Julie Dancy and Christina Holloway will be looking at furloughing employees from an operational perspective. And in addition, when we do get to the Q&A period, a number of our payroll colleagues will also be joining us to answer your questions as well. So in terms of how to ask questions during the Q&A session, the mics are muted for all webinar attendees. But you'll see there's a chat box and questions box within the viewing panel of GoToWebinar. You can use the chat box to let us know if you're facing any difficulties viewing the webinar. And in preparation for the Q&A session, please post your questions in the question box throughout the webinar, and we'll answer as many of them as possible at the end of the presentation. And it will look very similar to what you can see on this screen. This is what I can see on my screen, and yours will look very similar. And also, to make you aware, we will be following up with a copy of the slides and also recording, so don't worry about making lots of notes throughout. We will be sharing those with you. So moving on to the agenda for this afternoon, Julie is going to give you an overview of the job retention scheme legislation. She'll then hand over to Christina, who will take you through the MorePay furlough solution. And after the main body of the presentation, we will have the Q&A session. So I'll now hand over to Julie Dancy, who will take you through the legislation. Thank you, Julie.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you very much, Hannah. Thanks for that. Oh, wait, can I just check? Are we on the right screen? Can we see the right screen, everyone?
No, the slides don't seem to be moving forward.
My slides haven't moved forward, Hannah.
Okay, I will just have a quick look and see whether the slides are moving forward. Bear with me 1 second.
Right, okay, I can see the legislation screen, if that's okay. Okay, so yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to do a recap and a brief overview of the legislation around the job retention scheme. Hannah, if you'd like to move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so basically the job retention scheme is gives us the ability to furlough workers, furlough employees that are within the organisation. And really that means from a furlough, and I know it's not a well recognised terminology in the UK, but basically what that means is if you furlough a worker, it basically means that they cannot do any work. So it would only apply to those people that you do not expect to do any work and by that we mean non-revenue generating. So they can be furloughed and do things like training sessions, etc., but they cannot do revenue generating work at all. And that basically is a scheme that enables job protection. So it enables employers to protect their workers whilst we're going through, this difficult period of the pandemic. The scheme itself commenced on the 1st of March, and with the original communication that it was going to run for 3 months. There has been huge take up in this, and I think, I cannot, and obviously personal view is I don't think it will run after that 3 months, but it does give a lot of businesses the opportunity to utilise the scheme. What it basically means is that you can claim up to 80% or a cap of £2,500 a month, whichever is the lower. And then on top of that, you can also claim employer NI contributions and a minimum of employers' pension contributions for all auto-enrolment pension schemes. If you are planning as employers to top up any salaries up to 100%, the top-ups cannot be claimed. This applies only to the 80% salary. You cannot include commissions, bonuses and any fee payments in your claim, and the furloughed payments are subject to PAYE and other deductions. Just next slide please, Hannah. So who can actually claim? I mean, this is available to all UK businesses, charities, recruitment agencies, public authorities, and in most public sector excluded, but there are exceptions to that. Also, PAYE payroll scheme is effective as the 28th of February. So you have to be in a PAYE, registered as a PAYE business at the 28th of February 2020. It does also include businesses that have gone into administration, so they can be included. Okay, next slide please, Hannah. And this is basically an overview of the scenarios. I won't go through them line by line. They can be found in our knowledge pool on our MorePay website, where you can, read through and get more details. But basically, this is an overview of scenarios that can or cannot be furloughed. So you can use this as a reference point to see whether your employees are applicable to the furlough scheme or indeed if they're not. Next slide please, Hannah. And this is just to follow on. So basically anyone that is salaried in full-time or part-time employment, agency contacts, flexible or 0-hour contracts. If you have made redundancies in your organisation since the 28th of February, then you can subsequently rehire that employee and then apply the furlough to them. And any agency contracts, provided they're not working, can also be furloughed. But you must, follow the HR guidelines, which basically says that you must write to your employees and consult with them around the fact that you are furloughing them. And more information also can be found on this on our knowledge pool. Next slide, please, Hannah. So how do you arrive at the 80% calculation? So for salaried employees, full and part-time, you take the employee's actual salary or usual monthly earnings before tax as at the 28th of February, and that's the calculation that should be used. Where employees' pay varied, so if the employee has been employed for a full 12 months before the claim, you can claim the higher value, either the same month's earning from the previous year or the average monthly earnings from the 19-20 tax year. If the employee's been employed for less than a year, you can claim for an average of their monthly salaries since they started work by conducting a calculation. Or if the employee only started in February 2020, use a pro rata for their earnings so far in order to calculate your claim. Next slide, please. For those clients that use the salary sacrifice benefit schemes, the salary value to use is either 28th of February or an average over the year, and this is post-salary sacrifice. You cannot reduce the 80% of salary to pay for salary sacrifice benefits. But that said, if employees want to opt out of their salary sacrifice, this is seen as a life event, so it is possible that employees, should they wish, could opt out of the salary sacrifice scheme that you have in place. Next slide, please, Hannah. So what do you need to make a claim? So you will need your PAYE reference number or your ePAYE reference number if you're registered online. You need to know the number of employees that you're being furloughed. You need to understand the claim period, the start and end date, the amount claimed. So the minimum length you can actually furlough an employee for is 3 weeks. Employer's bank account number and sort code, the contact name and the phone number. So they're all the details that you need to pull together in order to make a claim. It has been said that the Revenue will retain the right to retrospectively audit the claims that are being made by businesses, and I would expect if you had, prior to the job retention scheme, you had 10 employees and then suddenly you were furloughing 60 of them, there might be questions asked. So it needs to be the right approach, obviously. Employers can only submit one claim every 3 weeks, which is the minimum length that an employee can be furloughed for. Next slide, please, Hannah. So in preparation for this, if you haven't already furloughed and you're getting ready to do so, this is sort of like a task sheet, if you like, where you would need to confirm whether you are eligible and that your employees are eligible by referring to the HMRC guidelines. Identify all employees in your organisation that you intend to furlough. Classify your furloughed workers as either salaried or variable paid. Agree your optional top-up value or percentage. Define your pay elements to be excluded, and complete the form that MorePay will provide from our payroll department. So when you're submitting your payroll, there is a form that we request that you complete in advance and send in with your payroll details. So MorePay can provide advice and guidance. If you are unclear, we'll have a frequently asked questions document, and then following at the end of this webinar, we'll be opening up to the wider team to be able to support any queries or questions that you may have in this relation to this scheme. Over to the next slide, please, Hannah. Okay, so from this point, I'm going to hand you over to Christina Holloway, who's going to talk to you in more detail around what does furlough mean for you as a payroll client for MorePay, and what steps you need to go and things that you need to consider. So I'll hand over to you, Chris, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Julie. That was a really good recap of legislation. I'd just like to reiterate Julie's message. There's a great deal of information available on our website, Knowledge Centre, and I'm sure most of you who are using our MorePay HR app will have seen our new chat bot, a robot which you can ask questions. So do keep an eye out for our blogs, etc., because it is absolutely essential that you are following the guidelines laid out when it comes to furloughing your employees. But moving on to the centre of this particular webinar, is a follow-on from the product update that was given last week, where there was a great deal of information about the solution that our developers are working towards delivering for us. And it's how this fits in with the challenges that clients and ourselves are facing during this pandemic. So, you know, life isn't stopping while we wait for a development release. However quickly that is coming, people have had to react. So this is just to examine what actions people have been taken and what we need to do to make sure that we keep up to speed with this ever-emerging legislation that is coming through from HMRC. So if we just move on to the next slide. So this will cover all our payroll services. I'm hopefully addressing our clients who are only using our MorePay HR software. So they're going to be operating this themselves. Our managed clients who send us their information through the MorePay HR website, and of course our Managed Plus clients where they use their own particular forms, don't use MorePay HR, but the functionality will be in the background for our payroll teams to use. So as our previous webinar alluded to, our development teams are working round the clock to deliver this new development into us as quickly as possible. And we are faced with changes that are hitting us daily. I've just come off a meeting today where we were discussing a latest change that was released on Thursday last week, very late. And so we are stressing that the solution we are giving clients at the moment is up to date as of information that has been released to us so far, but it is subject to change. So yes, we have spent a lot of time trying to make a solution which is easier for clients and obviously will work well in keeping the thousands of our clients paid on time, but inevitably clients will have been prompted to make decisions to reduce pay through the payroll already, which will have complications when it comes to backdating and reporting. And we want to just talk a bit about what we're doing to support our clients in rectifying this and to move forward in the most appropriate manner for your payroll. So if we move on to the next slide. Julie alluded to this already. Preparation is going to be key. For legislation, you need to understand the legislative requirements. It's really important that you follow the process in designating someone to be furloughed appropriately. So just make sure that you do make yourself familiar with all the information available to you and the guidance. Most of you, or all of you, I hope, will have received a communication from our operations teams today asking you for details regarding your furloughed staff. Now, this is for all our managed clients, not our software only, because naturally you'll be processing these yourselves. But we need to be sure that we look and examine at how people have been furloughing, and as I said, whether we need to apply a pre-release solution according to the timing of your payroll, and also obviously correct any adjustments that you might have made that we're unaware of. What we would ask you to do is to adhere to your input deadlines, and if possible, can you please send your payroll in early? Now, this might sound as if it's a little odd when you might feel that should I wait for the development to go through? We are in a business continuity situation ourselves. All our operatives are home-based and working from home, and it's working extremely well. But we must be conscious always of, in these circumstances, to get ahead as soon as possible. So we will still ask for you to send the payroll in early if possible, but certainly by your input deadline, because we need to balance the benefit of having that appropriate time to ensure we hit your deadlines, along with the benefit that this development will bring. The most important thing that we need to keep in mind is to make sure that these people, your employees, are paid on time. And if I can just remind everybody, if you haven't already done so, if you're using More Pay HR and have not completed your 2019-2020 end of year run, please can you do so as soon as possible. So they can be cleared out of the way and finalised in time for the April payroll. Okay, if we move on to the next slide. Okay, so this, how to furlough an employee. We're going to just have a quick recap on the new development that's coming in. Now, this was covered in great detail in a previous webinar. So I'll just go through the main points. We have got a delivery timescale there of approximately the 16th of April. We had an update, as I said, on Thursday from HMRC, where I doubt if it will hit the 6th, but we're certainly hopeful it will be in the next few days. And it's just a new complication with one of the particular calculations, which I'll come on to in a moment. So if we just move on to the next slide, I'll just go through and just pick out the main points. So for our More Pay HR clients, you'll recognise these particular screens. Well, this is a new screen for configuring codes for furloughed pay. So we're making the assumption at More Pay of the codes that need to be included in this furlough pay calculation. We're taking the guidance from HMRC and excluding commissions, any type of bonuses and fees. Now, for More Pay HR clients, you can go in and check and that the codes are that you, if you agree with that assumption. But please, if you are going to change it and include something which you believe to be correct, make sure that you get guidance from HMRC. We have had certain clients saying we have contractual bonus and contractual commission. We cannot see those contracts. We are not going to make that decision. If you do, just please make sure that you're clear. As Julie has said, we are fully expecting HMRC to do a retrospective audit of all areas of this process. As I'm sure you're all aware, in an audit, the first thing that they look at are benefits that can be claimed from the revenue, i.e. parental payments. And we do expect that this will be subject to review. Okay, on to the next screen. So it's beautifully simple. It's a new flag under our HMRC's documents change. Is this a furloughed employee? And it's just ticking the box. Very simplistic. If we just move on to the next screen. And here's the part where you put in the start date. The end date is not compulsory, is not mandatory at this stage, but when you do come to enter it, there is a proviso that it has to be a minimum of 3 weeks, which is the minimum amount of time that a furlough can last for. The salary will flag up there along with the furlough pay. It's at this stage that you would be able to override the furlough pay if you need to. Now, why would you want to do that? If you can see, there's a box there saying employee salaried. Now, there's 2 types of calculation. Either an employee who is salaried, i.e. just receives regular payments each pay period. We need to look at the pay for February 2020 and calculate 80% and pay the lower of that, or the 2,500. But there's a great deal of discussion around who is a salaried employee, or whether or not they are actually receiving variable pay. So someone who consistently receives different levels of overtime each month could be viewed as an employee who receives variable pay, even though the main bulk of their payment is salary. So we have asked on the data collection form that we've sent out to you today for you to confirm whether or not these employees are salaried or they receive variable pay. But if you tick that box, we will just be calculating as if they receive regular pay. It is actually, in fact, the average calculation that has thrown up a question by the new update that we received from HMRC very late before the bank holiday weekend, and which is currently being examined, and the specification is being adjusted as we speak. So that we'll keep you updated on that. Okay, next screen. Yeah, we have some, well, I think I've just covered this where it's highlighted here, where the employees are salaried and the reference salary and the furlough pay. So we can move on. Thank you, Hannah. Can you move the slide on for me, Hannah? Thank you. And then finally, I think we seem to be going very fast now. Finally, it will save and calculate accordingly. But once you do come to the end of the pay period, the codes will automatically that were stopped will automatically return to the employee's record, and the furlough pay will stop. Okay, so that's kind of a very brief overview of the new development that's planned for us and certainly underway. They're doing a sterling job. But now we're going to move on to the next subject, which is, have you already furloughed employees through the payroll? Well, I think I can probably answer that, because we've done a great deal of analysis of activities on the payroll. And it appears that where some clients have told us that they are furloughing and would like us to reduce pay, even though there were no guidelines firmly in place at that time, there have also been adjustments made by clients where clearly it looks like they are reducing pay by 20%. And it looks like they're going to be that they have furloughed, but they haven't made that. They haven't made us aware of that specifically. Now, because of the nature of the development, which is date driven. It's designed to make it as easy as possible, not just for clients, but for our internal teams, and to make the calculation automated and accurate as possible. It is designed in a certain way that those early adjustments may make it complex when it comes to the backdating. So your payroll teams need this information to make sure that we correct it. So when the development comes in, everything will work smoothly. So if we move on to the next slide. So yes, furloughing before the development release. I think we've covered quite a lot about the legislation compliance issues. We need to ensure that, well, our clients need to be ensured that the employees they have furloughed were eligible. It is clear in a very few cases that certain employees were not eligible, but have had their salaries reduced and continued. Calculations will be inaccurate at the moment, and that's understandable because it was very sketchy at the beginning. This is all being rushed out very quickly. As it emerges, we need to make sure that this is corrected as quickly as possible. And as I said, and I believe on the product webinar, it was alluded to the fact that manual adjustments we will need to go back and rework. So let's have a look at the next slide and see how we're going to do this. So this is for our software only clients. So here's a pre-release option. Now, I just want to emphasize that this is a measure that we're giving to our clients where we expect for the next few days that clients will still want to be running their payrolls. As I said, they'll want to get ahead, we want to get ahead, and the development, once it comes in place, we'll do another recalculation. So any anomalies that may be still in place will be corrected in May. But so for our bureau clients, so this is not for our managed clients, if you can just make sure you review all previous payments, enter a stop date against all regular payments of the date immediately prior to the furlough start date, so immediately the date before. If your payment codes are not set for being date driven, enter a stop flag and you will need to reverse the previous entries. Now, at this stage, you can manually calculate the furlough pay and enter using code 195, and it's FURLPY, furlough pay. Ensure you enter the start date of the first day of furlough. And if you're paying top up, you can use the code 196, FURLTU, furlough top up. These two codes are currently available now, but they do not have the calculation functionality attached to it yet. But by entering it against these codes, when the functionality is in place, the recalculation will work smoothly. Okay, so we have shared this instruction to our clients on a communication out today. So if we move on to the next slide, which will now look at our managed and our managed plus clients. As we've asked for before, if you can complete the form and return it to us before your next payroll. Here's all the information that we will need from you. And where applicable, we can manually correct entries made in the previous periods and record under these codes. So in order to bring it into line for when the functionality is there. Now, can I just make a point about the two codes that we're using? These are the ones that we will be using for furlough pay and furlough top up. if you want that functionality. Some clients have already used bespoke codes. The functionality and the reporting will not work against those bespoke codes. So I would recommend that you stick with our standard offering. Another thing we will not be doing is mixing and matching. Some clients have raised a question, how will this show on our payslip? Can we use different codes for separate employees so that they're not showed as furloughed? This is not something we recommend and not something we can really do. The audit needs to be clear and the reporting needs to be simplistic in order to be ready for when these are examined in the future. So if we move on. Now, of course, another complication is where naturally some employers have made people leavers and then found that they were able to reinstate them and furlough them, which is great for the individuals. Does set a bit of an issue for us because, of course, it's going to have to be a new record for the relevant employees, and therefore the functionality will not automatically capture their history. So that will be a manual intervention. So for our software-only clients, again, if you set them up as a new starter, make sure you use the continuous start date. You can either use our pre-release option, which I've just spoken about, or wait for the development and enter the furlough amount override into more PHR. Similarly, for Managed and Managed Plus, if you can give us a new starter, set them up as a new starter, or your Managed Plus clients, if you can send a new starter form, provide a continuous start date and make sure that you indicate their previous employee number, that would be really useful. Thank you. Okay, if we go to the next slide. And finally, a word for our newer clients. So naturally, the calculations all depend on history. So again, if you are new to us, you will need to provide the reference salaries and all the furlough pay for all your employees, because we won't have any information from February or the previous year. And clients with less than 12 months prior to the furlough start date, well, salaried employees would calculate accurately if you ran in February 2020, because that's the information from. But for all other employees who receive variable pay, you will need to provide the reference salaries or the furlough pay in order for the calculations to go through. Okay, so I think that may well bring that to be the final. Oh no, we've got the job retention reporting. This is one of the best bits. Now, the development is being delivered in 2 stages. So we have the bulk of the legislation is being delivered in the first stage. There's one part with the calculation of average earnings. You can compare the average result to an amount that an employee was paid in the same month in 2019 and pay the higher, the 2. And that will be coming in May, so there will be a catch-up. We're hoping that there won't be too many adjustments as a result of that, but that is going to be coming in May. Also for the job retention reporting, we first had an idea of what the revenue will require on this report on Thursday evening, and we still do not know what the format looks like, but we're imagining that it will require either CSV, Excel, some method that you can upload into their portal, whatever that will look like. So that will follow at a later stage in May. So if we move on to the next slide. That is what we, these are the details of what's been released. It will be, we will need to have the eligible furlough amount that can be claimed, national insurance amount, the employer's in pensions contribution amount, and the total claim amount. Further details are forthcoming and we will be updating you regularly. Okay, so next slide. Okay, I think we're now going to hand over to Hannah again, just to talk to you about the other services that you can use to support you through this furlough period.
Brilliant, thank you, Christina. So yes, we have put together some new services and support options for our customers. Some of these you may already be using, but I will quickly run through them in case there are any that you would like to find more information on. So to begin with, if you're looking at moving to a secondary payroll to MorePay, we do have a fast track implementation so we can ensure that we'll get your employees paid within 48 hours. That would just be a basic pay on previous month's pay. So should you have a supplier failure and you want to move your payroll supplier, we're able to support you with that. In addition, all our solutions are cloud-based. That includes our payroll and HR software. Through using employee self-service, for example, as well, you can remotely manage employee absence. You can set up hierarchy for approvals, whether that's of overtime, holidays, expenses. We do have payroll automation. So for managed customers looking at locking down their payroll, they can automate that process so they don't have to log in. They can lock down on the agreed date that they've got for their payroll. For our bureau and software customers that are managing the payroll themselves, there are elements that you can automate as well, and we can help you to get this set up. We do have managed payroll support. Anyone that doesn't currently have our managed payroll and is interested in moving to this, please get in touch with your commercial account manager and we can discuss this with you. From a HR consultancy perspective, we offer a range of different supports. One of the things that you may be interested in at the moment is our job retention scheme HR consultancy. We can make sure you're going through the process correctly and compliantly, and can also give you a range of templates to use when communicating with employees. In addition to that, we do have our 24/7 HR advice line. You can simply pick up the phone and ask your questions, whether that be about COVID-19 or any HR or employment law issue, and there will be always somebody there that can offer you expert advice. You can also insure on that advice. So if you take our best practice advice and do end up in tribunal for whatever reason, the awards and legal costs are covered as well. And finally, we have an employee assistance programme. As many employees are now working from home, making sure employees are looked after during these uncertain times is really important. And through the employee assistance programme, employees can pick up the phone and get confidential help. Now, I've just run through all of these very quickly. If you would like additional information on any of these products and services, please drop a message into the questions box now, and one of my colleagues will then follow up with you and they can give you some more information on any of these options that may be of interest to you. Now, I know that Julie and also Christina did mention our Knowledge Centre, and I will mention this to you again. If you haven't already been on the Knowledge Centre on our website, then I do urge you to do so. This is a section of the website that we're updating daily with blogs, FAQs, webinar recordings. There's so many useful resources in there, and I do urge you to go in and have a look at the content that's in there. And if you've missed any previous webinars, you can also catch up on the recordings within there. So we've now come to the Q&A section of the webinar, so do continue to drop your questions into the question box and we will work through as many as possible in the time that we do have left. As I mentioned earlier, we do have some additional colleagues that have joined us for the Q&A session, and they will also be getting involved in answering your questions. So I will just bring the questions up now and start working my way through them. So I'll start with the first question. The first question is, we completed a payroll on the 7th of April, which included 1 week of furlough. It was just marked as adjustment, not a furlough category. Can you advise how we work out what to claim in relation to Nixon pension for just that portion of the payroll?
Hello, sorry, it's Debs.
Hi,
So
Debs.
on the portion of the payroll, on the portion of the payroll that you've actually calculated yourselves, the national insurance would be the employer's national insurance cost 13.8%, but it is capped at the total for that pay period. So if you are claiming any employment allowance, you need to reduce that off the cost. You also need to take into account any employees who are on category M or J, as there won't be any employment costs. It'd probably be better if we could retrospectively do a calculation for you and actually put the adjustments through the payroll.
Brilliant, thank you. Moving on to the next question. The next question is, can furlough staff work for another company, i.e. for a local hospital?
Debs again, yes, they can. Furloughed staff can have more than one employment, so they can be furloughed with one employer and continue to work for another employer, or they could do charity work as well. It's just as long as they don't do any employment for yourselves.
Thank you very much. We've also had quite a few questions come through around commission, so I'll group a few of these together. We've had questions around things like, I had the understanding that we could not include commission that was guaranteed / contracted. Another person has asked, I thought commission was now to be paid. So if anybody could just clear up commission, we have had a lot of questions around that.
Hi Hannah, it's Jennifer here. I'll take that one. So just to clarify in the HMRC guidance on this one, pay is to include regular payments that the employer is obliged to pay, and this includes regular payments, wages and compulsory commission payments. It's the discretionary bonus and commission payments that should be excluded.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hopefully that clears that up for everyone. And now I'll move on to the next question, which is around variable pay. I've got several employees on variable pay. Following the advice on the .gov.uk website, I have taken an average of their last 12-month earnings and will be paying them up to the amount they are expecting, 80%, plus their variable pay to equate to under their yearly average. And they're saying, how do they go about inputting this within more pay?
Hi Hannah, Jennifer again. I think perhaps can we take that one away? I'm just conscious of the advice would be slightly different dependent upon whether the client uses our bureau or managed service. So yeah, if we can just make a note of that one, we can feedback directly after.
No problem, that's great. Thank you very much. So moving on, we've also had a few questions around the e-pay references and how to access those.
Hi, it's Julie Baker. The ePayRice reference is unique to your payroll. When you register for online with HMRC, they should send you out a letter acknowledging your registration. and that reference should be in the letter. If you haven't got the letter, or you lost the letter, whatever, then you would need to go back to HMRC to obtain that.
Brilliant, thank you. I'll just have another quick look through the questions. We have received a lot of questions, so we won't be able to get through them all during the webinar today, but we will follow up on any questions that we don't address during this live webinar. We've had a few questions around the communications that we've been sending out. We've had a question saying that the spreadsheet that we've asked customers to complete regarding furlough employees has a column that asks for top-up pay, and they're just asking, what is this? Does it include holiday pay and extra pay for the bank holiday?
It's Jennifer here. Happy to take that one. So effectively, we're asking in that column if you have made any agreement with your employees to top up the furlough payment, so to pay over and above what you can claim from HMRC. We are asking you to pop in that column for us the total pay value for your employees. If you're paying any past amounts for previous periods, i.e. overtime or previous holidays, that's separate. That column is intended for if you've made an agreement with your employees to top up and pay in addition to the reclaimable amount.
Thank you, Jennifer. We've also had a few questions about employees that have left. So one particular question is, if an employee left on the 31st of March and reinstated, would I need to enter the 1st of April as the continuous start date?
As the continuous start date, we would expect that to be the actual original date of employment commenced, and the start date to be the 1st of April. So the continuous start date would actually be their first date their original employment commenced.
Thank you. I'll just have a quick look through. I think we've got time just for a few more questions. Let's just have a quick look. We've had a few people asking around, is there any kind of reports that they can pull off that will give them an idea of roughly how much they'll be claiming back? Or is this more something that they would go to HMRC for?
The reporting part of is still in development, because we've been waiting to get that information from HMRC as exactly what they're wanting and the format. So we are intending on providing reports, but they're still in development while we're just finalising the information that HMRC require.
Thank you. We've also had a few questions about processing furloughed staff from March, and people are asking about the question is, if processing furloughed staff from March and recalculating in April, will this not then be larger than the 2.5k cap?
Again here. So within our communications we sent out, and again this is to both our bureau and managed clients, hopefully you should have received them either yesterday evening or first thing this morning. For our managed clients, where we are going to be doing the recalculations for you, if that is the case, if there are any significant overpayments, we would be contacting you to discuss those. Again, on our bureau platform, if there have been any that you've calculated in advance, and they would need to be amended in April retrospectively. But I think, yeah, the guidance originally issued from HMRC was still being clarified. So now that we have what we have, we will be looking back and making those retrospective adjustments.
Brilliant, thank you. Let's just see, I think we've got time for 2 more questions. So we've had questions around, let's just have a quick look. We've had a question, how do I input salaries before furlough at 100% and then the rest of the pay period as furloughed pay?
that should hopefully be, hopefully detailed guidance for both managed and bureau is within the communication we sent out both last night and this morning. But if any clarifications are required on that, please do get in contact with either your dedicated contact or payroll team, as they can talk you through that. On our managed service, we would ask that you complete the form that we've sent out. On the bureau service, that involves putting an end date on the existing salary and then starting the furlough payments. But again, if any details required, please contact us and we can help further to the communication.
That's great, thank you. We have had a few questions around maternity and paternity as well. Now, I'm not sure whether these questions would be more for our HR advice line and consultancy team. Questions around things like during maternity leave, employers are expected to pay 100% of employers' pension contributions. Does the same apply to furlough?
Yeah, I think that we will possibly need to get the advice of that team. As I've been reading all the guidance, I've not actually come across anything that's given any specific information regarding pension contributions whilst on maternity and furlough. So I do think we probably need to refer that to the advice team.
Debs, it's Anne. The only guidance so far on maternity and paternity is it works as it does now, with no change to existing requirements. There's no additional information other than that from HMRC at the moment, but it is a good thing that we could go back and ask them. So I think we should go back and ask those questions of them. You know, we are constantly in contact with our friends at the HMRC and the people actually making the guidelines. So we can put those questions and see if we get further details. But as it stands, the only thing we know about maternity paternity is that it runs as is, even though they are furloughed, even if they're furloughed.
Great, thank you, Anne. That's useful. So we'll now reach the end of our Q&A session. Like I say, if your question wasn't answered, then we will come back to you, and we'll also be sharing a copy of the slides and recording with you. So thank you very much for taking the time to join the webinar this afternoon, and thank you very much to Julie and Christina for hosting, and also to our panelists for answering your questions. If you do have any additional questions that you think of throughout the afternoon, then feel free to email them to myself. My email address is hannah, hannah.booth@morepay.co.uk. And like I say, we will be following up with the slides in the recording. Thank you very much, everyone.